I have some great HOA and Karen stories for you today. Here's our first one with 2 updates. Neighbor thinks that he is entitled to park in the fire zone because he's a firefighter and pays rent. I, a 41-year-old female, have been living in this apartment complex for 5 years now. I had some ongoing issues recently with a neighbor who was, not to sound unladylike, but an entitled butt. He blasts music when he is home and he smokes. I can smell it in the stairway. I generally try not to say anything to my neighbors because we all have to get along, and well, hey, he doesn't usually blast his music past 10 p.m., which is the quiet time, so I let it slide the few times that he does. But he has this other thing that is affecting other residents and is downright rude. We have a small parking lot behind the building and there is a small driveway to get in and out. There's plenty of parking in the complex, which houses, I guess, 150 residents. However, the entrance and exit to this parking lot is a driveway, and you can't park there because it's a fire zone. But my neighbor downstairs, a male about 22, I will call Karen, will often park there. Many of the neighbors have been annoyed as it's a very narrow place and it's extremely hard to go down it when a car is illegally parked on one side. There have been a couple of times when I and others had to go onto the sidewalk to avoid hitting his car or van, which can be dangerous. So, last night, I came home a bit late and I had to park in a different lot. Really, it was probably like not even 10 feet further walk for me because that rear lot was full and there was still plenty of parking elsewhere in the complex. Well, a car was parked in the fire zone, so I took a picture. About 2 hours later, another car was now parked behind it in the fire zone. I took another picture. A neighbor tried to enter the lot, there was some parking available now, and after he parked, he asked me whose cars they were. I advised that I wasn't sure. He was very upset because he had to get on the other side to avoid hitting them. I tried to call the towing number that's on the posted on the signs, telling us where not to park or that we would be towed. So I then knocked on my neighbor's door to ask who the cars belonged to, and he said his guest, and he just casually mentioned that he told them to park there. I explained that they needed to move their cars, that they were blocking traffic, and he did so. This morning, I stopped by the leasing office after getting some advice to do so, and I explained that this wasn't the first time it happened, but it was the first time I was speaking up about it, and the other neighbors had had this issue with him too. This was a fact. I take walks through the complex often, and I'm generally friendly with my neighbors, so we've talked about it before. The head of maintenance was there, and he told me that if I had any issue to call the emergency number for after hours and tell them to get the tech on duty to call me and to say that he dropped his name here as Bob, said to call the towing company directly because they have his private direct line and they will have his cars towed. Well, at about 4:30 p.m. today, my neighbor came knocking on my door. I opened it a little and we chatted. He told me that he didn't appreciate how I had insulted his guest by calling them idiots. I didn't recall saying that, but maybe I did. I did explain that due to having a neurological disorder and it raining yesterday, I was in a lot of pain. So while I don't recall saying that, I may have, and I apologize for that. He went on and on about how he's a firefighter and he would know if there was a fire and would move the car. I tried to explain to him that, well, regardless, he just can't park in the fire zone. That there's over 100 people in this complex, and there's plenty of parking, and we all have our own situations that don't justify parking in the fire zone. He ranted about how much he pays in rent, and I told him, hey, we all pay rent. For example, I have a neurological disorder, and the guy across from the hall is a military veteran. There are elderly people in the complex, and when he parks there, it blocks the traffic for everyone. He basically told me that he knows the cops in town, and I advised him that next time I'm just going to have to call the cars and have them towed, and he pouted and said that he was not going to park there anymore, so not to worry. I was shook up, so after I calmed down, I went across the hall. There are 4 apartments in the building, and I asked my neighbor there if he overheard the conversation. He did, and advised me that he will let the office know that he is also advised that he'll call if Karen's parking there again tonight, because he didn't know it was him, and he was upset as well. I then went downstairs to see my other neighbor, and he'd heard that Karen as well, and told me that he too would be speaking to the property management office in the morning as well. I then texted my very close childhood friend, who I will call M, and told him about the situation with Karen flaunting his status as a firefighter here in town. M was my senior prom date, and he advised me that what Karen did was wrong and very unprofessional by saying that. And he should know. He was the former fire chief for the department that Karen currently works in, and so was M's father, in fact. The current one is still a very good friend of the family. First update. One of the things that Karen mentioned to me was how I'm the only one who has an issue with him parking in the fire lane. Well, that's not the case. See, some of the neighbors have politely nicknamed me the Walker that don't know my name but know me from the complex because I take walks daily and nightly to get my steps in. As a result, I know several of the people here by name. I've given the few feral cats names, and I tend to know where most of the kids live. Not an intentional stalker, but because I'll see the kids running in and out of buildings as I walk past. As a result, most people will casually ask me if I know, say, whose pet someone belongs to, or whose bike or car, and so on. Well, this week I had no less than 4 neighbors ask me point blank if I knew the owners of the 2 cars that were blocking the parking lot. I helpfully, told them that they were guests of one of the tenants and told them my neighbor's name and apartment number. I also advised them how he's parked there before. Well, several of the neighbors had taken photos of him parking there but had no clue who it was, so they didn't report it sooner. Now they're reporting it. One actually told me that he had half a mind to go yell at Karen when he found out that Karen was so nasty to me about parking there, but said instead that he will send the photos that he has to the property management. The final update a few months later. A few nights ago, he blocked some cars in again by parking in the fire zone. I did what I was told by a prior property manager, we have a new one, and called 911. While I was on the phone with 911, my neighbor came out to curse at me. The dispatcher was concerned and said that he was sending the cops and for me to go into my apartment. While I was walking back to my apartment, he came out of his and he and his girlfriend started yelling and spitting at me. I recorded it, but when I later showed it to the police, they said it was not him harassing me because I responded back. It was an argument. I reached out to the property manager who basically told me that I was the problem. I told him that other neighbors had mentioned to me that have called the office to complain about parking violators, but nothing gets done. He said that was a lie, that I'm the only one who does, which is bullcrap. I've actually watched other neighbors call to complain. He also told me how my neighbor feels like that I'm picking on him by calling the police the other night. I said if he hadn't parked where he did, I wouldn't have called the police, and he needs to owe up to his part of the problem. The property manager continued to defend him, saying that just because he was breaking rules is no reason for me to report him, and kept trying to say that it was my fault and he feels like that I'm being mean to him for no reason. I told him that my neighbor needs to toughen up. He chose to park in a fire lane that clearly says no parking, and I know he's blocking people in. I then got a little hot-headed and I said, well, what does he think happens to women who are attacked? The first thing we're asked is how we brought it on ourselves. Maybe he needs to think about how he's bringing this on himself and realize that women who are attacked have it much worse. The conversation ended not long after that, and the manager later sheepishly admitted that my neighbor shouldn't be parking there and he would take measures, such as cameras and so on, to try to prevent it from happening. I don't expect him to, but the next time my neighbor's yelling and spitting at me, I'll just record it and not talk back and call the police and tell them that, per what they told me the other night, that's harassment. Yeah, something's fishy here. These guys are getting all buddy-buddy, and he's taking up for him. And of course, if he's breaking the rules, you should report him, especially if it's a danger to the public like the fire zone and all the 100-plus tenants inside the complex. Gotta love small-town politics, huh? I don't know. What would have you done? This is crazy. HOA story time. I bought my first home in the winter of 2021. It is a condo, half of a duplex, with the other half owned by my neighbor. Let's call her Carol, because her real name is all too appropriate. Together, we have equal interest in the property's HOA. Before I had even made my first mortgage payment, she was telling me that I needed to increase my HOA fees to account for an increase in expenses for lawn care. She reasoned she did not need to do the same because she was unemployed and handled the books. Well, I proposed the alternate solution of doing lawn care ourselves, which she agreed to, and we have shared the duties moving forward. Fast forward to a few weeks ago. Leaves were covering the front and the backyards and the driveway. I noted this, especially the driveway, as it can get slippery with leaves, but I could see a lot more leaves were yet to fall. On a Sunday morning, after we had been working at the craft fair for over 12 hours the day before, my neighbor texted to ask if we planned to do any lawn cleanup. I replied, explaining that it was on my to-do list, but was leaving for a trip that week and I planned to address it the following weekend. I received no reply, but noticed that she had people over that evening, so I assumed that she had been looking for it to be done that day before her company arrived. The next day, she texted me that she took care of the raking that time, but was so exhausted that she could not move the pile of leaves that she created until the day after. It had rained earlier. She said that the leaves could not have waited because they would mat and freeze together. I offered to finish where she had left off since I had an unexpected day off, but she declined. The weekend following our trip, as I had said we would, I raked both yards and my partner cleared the driveway. I distributed some of the collected leaves along the edge of the yard to decompose and feed the garden beds, and I added the rest to a compost pile that Carol had started in the far back corner of the yard. The next morning, she texted me asking to finish the job by moving all of the leaves to the compost pile. I explained that the placement was intentional. This then prompted her to send me a long email, in lieu of a condo meeting, and going into general condo concerns, but really focusing on the yard work and the surrounding expectations. Throughout it, she expressed that she was open to my ideas, but the primary impression was, "I know better than you." She details why the lawn needs to be mowed weekly during the summer, but not cutting it too short. She says that only moving the leaves to the side of the yard will cause them to be blown back into the yard, and instead they all must be moved to the pile at the back of the yard. She also mentioned that she is older, so she needs to reduce the amount of work that needs to be done, while also saying that this is the way that has worked for so long. She does her fair share of lawn care, which I suppose I'm fortunate for. The issue is really that the lawn has to be kept to her standards, which I have tried to address, and she claims that I am holding my opinions and assumptions against her. Am I being gaslit over here? I am at a loss of words on how to handle her anymore, and I'm really feeling that I just need to find an actual house for myself and just be done with this HOA nonsense. At this point, I think the simplest solution would be to go back to paying a third party to handle lawn care, giving up the hope of helping the environment. Now, Carol, our Karen of the story, is a 60-something divorcee with adult children. She recently described her work-from-home job as editing one PDF a day. My partner and I have schedules that keep us out of the house 12 hours a day during the work week, leaving the weekends for cleaning the house, errands, and work on my side hustle. I'm working to be more eco-friendly and sustainable, and I'm very interested in the no lawn movement, but I understand that I share the property with another person with her own views. At our first condo meeting, I asked about starting a compost pile, and she said that it would attract bears. I do not spend any time outside on our property because of several factors, on top of my lack of free time. Our backyard is very buggy, regardless of the time of day and year it seems, to the point that Carol sets up her chairs in the driveway. We have a 20-pound dog that she asked us early on to not let him do his business on the lawn, and he does not get along with her cat that frequently roams the property. Carol spends much of her time out there, so I would have to be prepared to listen to her on a phone call or having a very one-sided conversation about her life. Like the last time I went outside for a while, she told me how her 3 neighbors were conspiring against her. She told me at least 2 of them blocked her number, but of course, she is the victim. Insufferable Karen, how would you handle her? I would just want to make peace, but at the same time, I want her to know that no, this ain't cool. What would you do? HOA board voted to pay board member $10,000 a month for part-time oversight of financials. Recently, our board voted to oust our management company due to incompetence, which was a move that I think all of the condo owners support. The previous management company never lived up to expectations, and during an investigation prior to turnover to the new management company, the board found numerous financial problems, including delinquent accounts, mismanaged books, and services that had been shut off due to non-payment. Thus, the board decided to hire someone to oversee the financials as the management changed hands. Something that makes total sense, I think. However, rather than seek external expertise, or even seek expertise within the condominium owners in the complex, the board decided in private to hire one of its own members. This member claims to be moving their professional life around to make this accommodation, which may be true. However, the payment for their services is $10,000 a month for up to 20 hours a week. A quick Google search for accountants and auditors shows the average salaries in the $70,000 range, which is well below what the board decided to pay this member for their services. The bylaws allow payment to a board member for specific services, so this appears to be allowed, But the board seems to have skipped some very common sense steps, such as searching for expertise, perhaps better expertise, outside of the board and at the best value to the new homeowners. Does this violate ethics rules, fiduciary responsibilities? For the record, if that guy works the maximum 20 hours a week, he's getting paid $125 per hour, whereas with the $70,000 example, that's only $33 an hour. Whoa, something's going on here. They need to investigate this now. Lawyer up. What would you do? Sued the HOA. They towed my truck twice off my property with updates. Click the video on your screen so you find the final fallout of this one, and I'll see you there.